Welcome, everybody. I'm James here with the Political Insider, and we got a very special guest today, the man, the myth, the legend, Roger Stone. Welcome, Roger. Thank you for joining us.
I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, man, we got a ton to talk about today. You're very close to the president. You've been around the block on political circles for a long time. So let's just start real quick for some of our audience who might not be so aware. Basically, your history, you worked with President Nixon, you worked with President Reagan, and you've known Trump for a long time. Now, can you give us a little background really quick on how you
Sure.
came to know Trump?
I've known Donald Trump and worked for him on and off for almost 40 years. I met him in 1979 when I was sent to New York to organize Governor Ronald Reagan's campaign for president in the Empire State. And I knew that Donald Trump had been approached by George Bush, Howard Baker, John Connally, and all the other candidates. And I had heard that he was unimpressed with any of them, and I wanted to recruit him for the Reagan campaign. So through his attorney, the notorious Roy Cohn, I got an appointment to see him. I pitched him on why Reagan could win. He was very interested. A meeting was set up with his father, Fred Trump, who was a real conservative, a personal friend of Barry Goldwater's and a major donor to the Goldwater campaign. And Fred and Donald Trump raised $100,000 each for Ronald Reagan's presidential campaign, which is enormous money in 1980.
For sure.
So for those who say, oh, Trump's not a conservative, Trump wasn't there, he was there in the Reagan Revolution. He was at Ronald Reagan's table at the Waldorf Astoria the night that Reagan announced his candidacy.
Wow.
We became very good friends after the election, after Reagan became president. As I think many people know, I joined or formed a firm called Black, Manafort, and Stone. And among our first clients was the Trump Organization, and then later Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts. By 1988, I began thinking about the idea of Donald Trump for president. The reason for that was I was impressed by his independence, by his courage, by his brashness, and by his flair for publicity. He understood the news cycle and how it worked. He understood how to popularize an idea, and he certainly understood branding. Trump,
for sure.
Trump is on the side of everything he owned. And I liked the idea that he wasn't connected in any way to the mistakes of the past. And I'm sure he had donated to both Republicans and Democrats, but he wasn't a neocon. He was not, connected to the mistakes that the country, I think, is still suffering for. And he had an enormous amount of courage. When I first said, in 1988, I said, you ought to think about running for president. He said, and I quote, "You're out of your mind."
That's awesome.
I think he liked the publicity of the idea. He liked the being mentioned. It was very flattering, and he always toyed with it in the early years. But I go back to an interview that he gave with Oprah Winfrey, where she said, "Donald, do you think you'll ever run for public office? Do you think you'll ever run for president?" And he said, "No, I don't think so, unless things get so bad that I have no choice." That is where we were in 2016.
Wow. That's crazy. Did you ever see that coming? Did you see him actually, because I know he, back in like the 2000, I think year 2000, he was kind of flirting with the idea of running. Did you actually ever see him jumping on the Republican ticket or actually going and running for the Republican nomination? Did you see that coming at all?
Well, first of all, he is a lifelong Republican, as were his parents. He was so turned off by the war, George Bush's war in Iraq, that for 2 years he became a Democrat. Then he switched back. In 1988, he was, in 2000, he was so disenchanted with the Bushes that he briefly considered a Reform Party run. But then I think he correctly determined that in America, to get elected president, you have to either be a Republican or a Democrat. The structural disadvantages for an independent or a third-party candidate are just too great to overcome, getting into the debates, getting on the ballot, and so on. Also, I think most people understand that in this country, if you run as a Republican, no matter how unattractive you are as a candidate, you start with a base of 35, 38% of the vote. In America, if you run as a Democrat, doesn't matter how weak your candidacy, you start with somewhere around 40% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
When you start as an independent, you start at 0% of the vote. You have to first construct a base before you can even be viable.
Mm-hmm.
So Donald figured out on his own that getting elected as a Reform Party candidate in 2000 was improbable, that he would probably just cost George Bush the election and inadvertently elect Al Gore, an idea that he didn't think was very attractive. But by 2012, he was deadly serious. He came this close to running in 2012. He had, a strong dislike for Mitt Romney, a distrust, I would say. He met Romney, he came away and said, boy, this guy doesn't believe in anything.
Wow.
Or more precisely, he'll believe in anything he needs to believe in to get elected. He was very, I think, struck by Romney's insincerity.
Yeah.
And he also concluded in 2012 that Romney's head start was too great, that it was too late. And then that political genius, Michael Cohen, convinced him to endorse Mitt Romney because Mitt Romney was, as we both know, a certain winner.
Right.
Oops.
Wow.
So on New Year's Day, 2013, the first day of the year, Romney had been defeated the previous November, just roughly 30 days prior. I called Donald at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, where he was for the holiday, and he said, I should have run in 2012. I could have run. Romney was a loser. I should have run. I could have beaten Obama. I said, well, I agree with the fact that you should have run. I think it would have been a tough race because Obama was an incumbent.
Right.
And he said, well, I'm not making this mistake again. I'm running in 2016. Wow. I said, really? He said, yeah, in fact, I just got the paperwork back. I have trademarked the phrase,
right,
make America great again.
Right, you trademarked it right after.
Before the end of 2012, before the end of the year, he had already trademarked that brand, that slogan.
So he knew then he was going to do it.
Said he was. Now, he had said that before, and I think a lot of reporters made fools of themselves by predicting that he would never run.
Right.
This was all just a big publicity stunt and that he wasn't serious. He is, without any question, the most unconventional political figure you've ever met. He is not somebody who studies polls. He is not somebody who is dictated to by position papers written by somebody else. No one puts words in his mouth. Nobody decides what Donald Trump thinks but Donald Trump. So when people say, oh, Roger Stone, you made Donald Trump president. No, Donald Trump made Donald Trump president.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of happy to have been along for the ride.
Yeah.
But he's very much his own man. There is no Karl Rove in Trump land. There never was and there never will be. Not Steve Bannon, not Roger Stone, certainly not Michael Cohen.
So yeah, you were with the campaign for a little bit at the beginning, and then you left. Did you keep in touch with Trump through the campaign? Did you keep in touch with some of the campaign team? Did you offer some informal advice?
I kept in touch with the candidate himself.
Yeah.
We had a brief. There were brief bruised feelings. He, of course, would tell the press that I was fired, but I had shown my resignation letter to a New York Times reporter and a Miami Herald reporter the night before. I felt that I could be more effective on his behalf outside the campaign. I produced my book, The Clintons' War on Women, which is the definitive oppo dump on Bill, Hillary, and their greedy, corrupt little daughter, Chelsea. And this, covers the Arkansas years as well as Bill's horrific chain of sexual assaults and rapes against various women, details Hillary's role in hiring the heavy-handed private detectives and the mean lawyers to threaten Bill's victims into silence. It lays out, Uranium One. It lays out the Clinton Foundation. It lays out the rape of Haiti after the earthquake. Even Bill and Hillary selling blood from the Arkansas prison system, offshore, that's never been screened.
Wow.
It's all there. It's and I commend this book to you. You can get it at Amazon or Barnes and Noble. But I knew I wanted to publish that. I knew I wanted Trump to read it, but I did not want him to get blamed for it. That was one of the reasons that I left. I also had other independent ideas about how best to help him get elected. I probably gave more speeches on his behalf, did more surrogate media appearances than I ever did for any other candidate. And we remained friends then and today.
Do you still talk to him today or occasionally? You ever get
Well,
through on
it
the
is
White
less
House?
and less because I think his lawyers have urged him not to talk to me.
Yeah.
My lawyers have urged me not to talk to him until we get through this partisan witch hunt that is being conducted against him.
Yes.
This is, I think to most people, this is kind of obvious. This is the entrenched political establishment trying to undo the results of the last election. They couldn't beat him at the ballot box. So now they want to try to hook up some false premise for removing him.
Yeah.
There is no Russian collusion. This is a myth. It's a fairy tale.
Yep. I think a lot of people see through it. You know, they see.
More and more people are seeing through it. It's taken some time. The relentless repetition of this false narrative by the mainstream media, I think, created a false impression in the country. It was probably once a majority that Trump somehow colluded with the Russians. The truth is, all Mr. Mueller has been able to show so far was Russian meddling in our election. And that was ham-handed, poorly executed, ineffective in terms of changing any votes. And whoever wrote those ads obviously had English as a second language because the ads barely make sense. Plus, the Russian meddlers appear at some point to have been pro-Hillary, anti-Hillary, pro-Bernie, anti-Bernie, pro-Trump, anti-Trump. It looked to me like all they were trying to do was sow discord.
Right.
That's not colluding to elect Donald Trump.
Right. They're trying to sow division in the country, and they pretty much succeeded. You know, Democrats jumped onto it, and they said, look, this is happening. You know, this is terrible. And
but let's give the media credit. There was a candidate in bed with the Russians.
Yes.
There was a candidate whose top aides were making millions of dollars from the oligarchs around Vladimir Putin.
Right.
There was a candidate and her husband who took $145 million from the Russian energy company. At the same time, the sale of 20% of America's enriched uranium rights were on the table for Russian acquisition. That candidate was Hillary Clinton. If you're looking for collusion, there it is.
Yep. All right, yeah, let's get more into this Russiagate thing. I mean, this is tied to it, but it's the biggest news this week, you know, the Michael Cohen plea deal. Everyone, I think everyone knows out there that Michael Cohen was prosecuted and taken to court because this is like Mueller's attempt to try and get him to sing, you know, squeal on Trump, that kind of thing. What's your take on Michael Cohen's plea deal?
Well, I know Michael Cohen very well. I've known him for a substantial period of time. He is nobody's idea of a genius. He represented Donald as an attorney. He wanted to be in the campaign. Donald did not want him in the campaign. By the way, when I call him Donald, I'm not being disrespectful.
I know,
the first time I met him, he said to me, call me Donald. And I did for 40 years.
There you go.
The day after the inauguration, I called him and I said, congratulations, Mr. President. And he said, please call me Donald. And therefore, I have permission. But Cohen had his own problems. We've seen this over and over again. Tax evasion, bank fraud, and so on. So I believe the special counsel has now composed Michael's testimony. Michael Cohen says the president directed him to make payoffs to Stormy Daniels. What corroboration does he have besides his word? Does he have a witness who heard this? Does he have a document that proves it? No. He has his testimony, and he's in a jam. So I guess there's 2 points. One, even if this did happen, it's a campaign finance violation at worst. The Clintons took $145 million from the Russian energy company. Barack Obama sold guns to ISIS. Those are serious transgressions. Paying off a stripper? Please give me a break.
It's nothing. I mean, I don't think anyone is has their hands up and is screaming about that these payments were made. But you know, Democrats are making a big deal out of it. As soon as the Cohen thing.
They don't have anything else. And therefore, they're going to try to, if they think this is the seeds of impeachment, I think they're incorrect. Maybe Donald Trump directed those payments because he didn't want to mortify and embarrass his wife. Could that be the reason? then those payments would be perfectly legal.
Right.
So the campaign finance case is a relatively weak case. But when you couple it with the conviction of Paul Manafort on a series of charges that don't relate to Donald Trump or campaign 2016 in any way, you get a publicity double whammy that has given the impeach Trump movement, a breath of fresh air and an ability to retrench.
Right.
I predicted yesterday, based on excellent sourcing, that the special counsel is going to charge Donald Trump Jr. with lying to the FBI.
Okay. Yeah.
Notice that they're not charging him for having an illegal meeting with a Russian at Trump Tower, because there's nothing illegal about that meeting.
Right.
Or put more precisely, the only thing illegal about that meeting is how the woman got in the country, how she got a visa from the Obama State Department, and why she was meeting with an official from GPS Fusion before and after the Trump Tower meeting.
Right.
I think that's called briefing and debriefing. That's the only question about this meeting.
Right.
So this is clearly a time when the deep state, when the entrenched political establishment is making their move.
Right.
It is not coincidental that they are censoring Alex Jones and shutting down InfoWars. It is not coincidental that they're shadow banning many conservative voices on the internet and across the spectrum. This is part of the plan. Take away your First Amendment rights, then take away your Second Amendment rights, and then get rid of Donald Trump. That is the plan.
Okay, so you mentioned Fusion GPS. I really wanted to ask about this. I don't get it. Like, Hillary hires Fusion GPS. His campaign does it through an intermediary. Fusion GPS is working with the Russians a little bit to gather all this intel for the famous dossier. What's the deal with Fusion GPS? I mean, I know you're very connected in that kind of thing, but I mean, they're like
first of all, if you're a political research operation, you got to give these guys credit. They got paid 3 times for the same work. Hillary paid them.
Clever.
And let's start from the beginning. A Republican donor paid them initially, connected to Marco Rubio. Then Hillary and the Democrats paid them, and now we know the FBI paid them. So they got paid 3 times for essentially false information. Once again, you want evidence of Russian collusion? Russian intelligence agents produced most of this false narrative.
Right.
But more importantly, they take that document and they use it as the underlying legal rationale for the surveillance of Trump's campaign.
FISA court, yes.
Right. FBI Director Comey said before the Congress, and I quote, "The FISA application was based on a broad mosaic of information." But when we got the actual application, even with 400 pages, 300 of them blacked out, redacted, it's obvious that this is the only piece of information on which the surveillance was based. And that is an abuse of power far worse than Watergate. They're using the authority and the capability of the state to spy on the Republican candidate for president. It makes Watergate look like a fourth-rate burglary.
All right, so I got to hit on this. Donald Trump Jr., you just mentioned him. Is Mueller going after him next? You said they're going to try and get him for lying to the FBI.
I believe so. And notice they're not going after him for the underlying crime, because there is no crime. He's done nothing wrong.
Right.
But he went in for multiple interviews. All they got to do is catch you in one discrepancy. Whether or not that discrepancy is meaningful or not is almost immaterial. Right. Look at General Mike Flynn, who I think is a great patriot. The FBI concluded, now that we've seen the documents, that he didn't lie. Right. So why did they jack him up? They jacked him up to get him out of that position because he threatens the New World Order. He threatens the neocons. He was loyal to Trump's vision of being a non-interventionist. One of the major reasons I think Trump was elected is because he said to the American people, no more multi-billion-dollar endless foreign wars where you can't see why we're there, what our interests are. Right.
Right. Okay. So Donald Trump Jr. might be the next target. What about yourself? I mean, I think there was a New Republic article last week. It was
actually much worse. Mother Jones.
Oh, yes.
These guys are just clowns.
Well, they were working hand in glove with the FBI half the time,
Yeah, exactly. So the editor of Mother Jones was among those pushing the fake dossier. On
David Corn, right? Yeah.
So if anybody ought to be investigated and indicted, I would say it's Mr. Corn. But they wrote an extensive piece about my independent activities on behalf of Donald Trump, and they complained that I paid somebody's mother $3,500, and maybe it was a pass-through. It wasn't. Meanwhile, Hillary pays a Democratic law firm $300,000 for a phony dossier, but Mother Jones isn't interested in that.
Not at all.
Here's the point. There's no question that I am most definitely in the special counsel's sights. I think he's very frustrated because he can't find any evidence of Russian collusion. And the narrative that you've heard from MSNBC and CNN that the Russians hacked the DNC, unproven, an allegation, unproven. The Russians then gave the information to Julian Assange. Julian Assange gave the information to Roger Stone. Roger Stone gave it to Donald Trump. That is 100% false. There is no evidence or proof to any of that.
They would have found it by now, wouldn't they? I mean,
well, here's what they do know. I did very accurately predict on Twitter what WikiLeaks was going to do. It wasn't that difficult. I followed the WikiLeaks Twitter feed, and I set a Google News alert for Julian Assange. And I read every interview he gave in a timely fashion.
Yeah.
He tells you everything he's going to do.
Right.
And Assange himself has said, Roger Stone never said or wrote anything that we ourselves hadn't already announced.
Right.
So, yeah, I punked the Democrats. I bluffed and I postured. But even the idea that when I said the Podesta's time in the barrel, the referring to two people,
right,
John and Tony, whose business dealings in Russia had been publicly reported in April of 2016 in the Panama Papers. I had just gotten an opposition research memo that laid out their involvement in uranium, banking, gas, and all these other lucrative deals that they had under the auspices of their good friend Vladimir Putin. And that is what I was referring to.
Right.
What happens now is they take the word "the" out, as if I said Podesta's time in the barrel will come. Shortly thereafter, we learn that Podesta's emails have been accessed, and therefore they say, oh, Stone knew in advance. No, actually, I would argue that my now iconic tweet had nothing to do with his emails. Didn't even refer to John. It referred to the Podestas. Even in the House Intelligence Committee final report, they dropped the word "the," but you can go back to the original, and there it is.
Wow. Okay, cool. I mean, so they're trying to get this stuff on you. Mueller has you in his sights. What is your impression of Mueller? You know, when he was initially assigned, the media narrative was the guy's a straight shooter. You know, a lot of congressional Republicans backing the decision, saying, you know, this guy, he'll do a good job, and he has no vendetta here. You think that's all a load of hogwash?
I think that ignores his public record. Look, this guy, he arrested the wrong three men in the anthrax investigation, and the guy he finally did arrest dies mysteriously of an aspirin overdose in the hospital. He lets three men rot in a Boston jail for a murder that he knows they didn't commit, as the U.S. Attorney for Boston, to cover up for FBI mob informants. He has multiple reports of 5 men training at a flight school in Sarasota, Florida, who turned out to be 5 of the 9 9/11 hijackers. He fails to investigate, and then after the fact, he declares that the Saudi family in the Sarasota area that was harboring these men had no connection to the 9/11 plot. Documents obtained through a Freedom of Information Act by Judicial Watch shows that's a lie. He's actively involved in the cover-up of BCCI. He's in and out of government making millions of dollars. This is the Boy Scout. This is the White Knight. He is a hitman for the establishment. He is the frame is his specialty.
Right.
And I have no doubts about his partisanship. How many Republicans has he hired for his investigation? Well, that would be none.
Yeah.
The woman leading the questioning about me before the grand jury is Jeannie Reid. She represented the Clinton Foundation in the email scandal that I'm being investigated as part of.
That's craziness. I mean, it's so plain that the whole thing is corrupt from the get-go, and the fact that they've been investigating Trump for 3 years or so, and they have nothing to go on. They have no evidence to present of collusion, and yet they still go on, and it's kind of crazy to think about. Now,
well, and they don't even pretend that it's about Russian collusion anymore.
Well,
maybe it's obstruction of justice, or maybe it's perjury. This is nonsense. But there is only one man who can save this president. there's only one person who can put a stop to this abuse.
Who's that?
You're to the point now in the country where 50% of the people last week said the prosecution of Manafort was completely political.
Well, yeah.
You have half the people saying that the Mueller investigation is a partisan witch hunt. You've got 4% economic growth. You have a rebounding economy, millions of new jobs. The president's political capital in a roughly divided country will never be greater than it is at this time.
Right.
It is really time to put an end to this abusive process.
Okay, so, barring that, if that doesn't happen, really wanted to ask you, Mueller's looking at you. Would you ever actually consider the possibility of sitting down with him? Would you ever, if he ever called, I guess he'd give you a ring on the phone or send FBI for you or however that works. Would you ever?
Look, I guess I would not rule out cooperating with him if he came to me with evidence of a crime by somebody else. But there's no circumstance under which I'm going to testify against Donald Trump. Zero chance. That's not happening.
Okay.
Manafort was squeezed and he stood tall.
Yep.
Michael Cohen was squeezed and he folded like a house of cards. I'm not going to testify against Trump. I haven't committed any crimes. Now, that said, we both understand that a runaway federal prosecutor abusing the grand jury system can get an indictment against the proverbial ham sandwich. I'm not interested in being Mr. Mueller's lunch.
Yes.
And it is abundantly clear that they can conjure up some phony indictment against you to squeeze you. In my case, they'd like to silence me. They don't want me going on this program or InfoWars and criticizing Mr. Mueller. They don't want me on CNN or Fox criticizing the investigation. And maybe if they're lucky, they think they can get me to flip and testify against my friend of 40 years. I choose to fight. People want to help me, can go to stonedefensefund.com. Stonedefensefund.com. I met with a lawyer last week. He told me he wants, I hope you're sitting down, you are, $2 million to represent me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I am not wealthy.
Yeah.
If you go online, you'll see a story that says Roger Stone is worth $20 million. In your dreams. I'm not Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort always made a lot more money than I've ever made. I was never involved in international politics.
Right.
I still have to work very hard, flogging my books and serving my clients to provide for my family. And this does threaten to destroy me financially. I mean, I'm being sued by the Democratic National Committee. They're suing me, the Trump campaign, Donald Trump Jr., the Russian state, Vladimir Putin, WikiLeaks, the Russian army.
Yeah. Wow.
Jared Kushner, Bozo the Clown. I mean, this lawsuit is a joke and a mistake.
Okay,
because we hope to use it in discovery to get access to their servers to prove them once and for all that they were never hacked by anybody, never mind the Russians. The forensic evidence published in a long piece in the Nation magazine, that's not National Review.
Yeah, that's pretty liberal.
Shows that the forensic evidence and the download speeds would indicate that the information was never hacked. It was downloaded to some kind of a portable drive and taken out the back door. Right. Probably by Seth Rich.
The man who must not be named, yes. Okay, so yeah.
But that lawsuit will cost me, hundreds of thousands of dollars. An Obama front group in Washington, D.C. filed a lawsuit against me. Stop me if you've heard this one. The Russians hacked the DNC, gave the information to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks gave it to Roger Stone. Stone gave it to Trump. Yeah. When it came time for the evidentiary part of their case, they point to the stories in the Daily Beast and HuffPo as their evidence. That's not evidence.
That's not evidence at all.
Fake news. Yeah. So that lawsuit was dismissed. That cost me $285,000 just to get this lawsuit dismissed.
Terrible.
So between the lawsuits and the investigations by the Senate Intelligence Committee, which does not seem to have a single pro-Trump member based on what I can see, it's got a used car dealer from North Carolina running the committee. It's a disgrace, in my opinion. The legal fees are enormous. Right. They want every email I've ever written that has the word Trump in it. Can you imagine how many emails that is?
That's insane. All right, yeah, we'll definitely include a link in our stories to your Amazon page with your books and stonedefensefund.com, help you out a little bit. I wanted to talk about you're a target of Mueller, but you've also been a target of social media censorship. Now, that's a huge thing in the news a lot. You've seen Alex Jones get kicked off various platforms. You yourself have been banned from Twitter. A lot of other conservative voices have been banned from Twitter. They try to paint it like it's all-encompassing thing. We banned some terrorists and then we banned Alex Jones. So we're just getting everybody on all sides. Can you tell us more about social media censorship, why it's happening to conservatives?
Yeah, this is kind of obvious. I think that Trump's election would never have been possible without the rise of a vibrant, robust alternative media. Mm-hmm. In other words, ABC, NBC, CBS, the mainstream media lost control of the political narrative in 2016 for the first time ever. And they didn't like it. So if you didn't like what you were seeing on CBS, you could get alternative news at Breitbart or here at the Insider or, at the Daily Caller or at InfoWars.
Right.
They now want to put the toothpaste back in the tube. The only people they're banning are conservatives. And they're using a dozen monopolistic antitrust techniques that are highly illegal to do so. And that's their vulnerability.
Right.
And they call it hate speech. So it's okay to criticize Catholics or to criticize white people. That's perfectly all right. But if you criticize radical Muslims or if you criticize, liberals, well, that's hate speech.
Right.
Who's to decide what hate speech is? Look, you don't have to agree with Alex Jones on everything. In fact, you don't even have to agree with him on anything to respect his First Amendment right to speak.
Exactly.
I'm against censorship. I don't care if you're the looniest left-wing loser in the world. You still have a right to speak.
Right.
And when Twitter banned me for life about a year ago under their extremely vague guidelines, I think I was just a test case.
Yeah.
I mean, I made the mistake of hurting Jake Tapper's feelings in a tweet. And, and
not
I
a hard
lost
thing to do.
150,000 followers because of it.
Right.
Now they're openly just banning anybody they disagree with. This is a slippery slope.
For sure.
And frankly, the president and the Congress need to act. This is pretty simple.
Yeah.
The president calls the deputy attorney general for antitrust, and he tells them to move in court against Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so on. Antitrust laws are being violated. We need to see all their internal manipulation of the algorithms and the other programs they have. And let's get to some of the things that James O'Keefe and Project Veritas have exposed, that, yes, it's conservatives who are specifically being targeted.
Yeah. So in lieu of, Trump and Congress or whoever acting, what can normal people do in the meantime? They feel like they're being suppressed.
Well, the best thing you can do is to take the links that you find compelling. So let's take, for example, the link to this interview, if you find it compelling, and put it on your own Facebook. Put it on your own Twitter feed. Send it out to everybody on your contact list in your email system and tell them to do the same.
Awesome.
They may be able to censor Roger Stone, but they cannot censor all of us. And that's one of the absolute keys. It seems pretty simple, but you have to spread the word. I think that's key.
Awesome. Well, anyway, I just want to thank you for coming on, Roger. We appreciate you answering all the questions. Again, if you guys check out his books, go to Amazon, look up Roger Stone. We'll include links for his books. You'll definitely want to check him out, especially the Hillary Clinton one. That sounds like a, pretty detailed account, comprehensive. And also we'll include a link to stonedefensefund.com. You can check out, that and help out Roger. I mean, he's coming at you from all sides. It's terrible. It's awful.
Well, look, others may choose to fold. I choose to fight, but I can't do it unless patriots and conservatives and Republicans and friends have my back. So please go to the site and make a donation. I'm not crying wolf. I've got a runaway federal prosecutor, and they're in every facet of my life. In other words, they're asking detailed questions about my family life, my personal life, my private life, my political life, my social life. What do these things have to do with Russian collusion in the 2016 election? If I drink a little too much vodka, not Russian vodka, of course, or if I smoke some medicinal marijuana, whose business is that? That's legal here in the state of Florida. But this is an intensely personal thing. They're seeking to silence me and to try to get me to turn on the president. And that's not going to happen.
All right. One last question to get it out on a light note. I know you're a big sartorial expert. One of our colleagues wanted me to ask you, who besides Trump is the best, and Trump and yourself, who's the best dressed man in Washington, D.C.?
Boy, that's a very tough question. By the way, lose that T-shirt as soon as possible.
Okay, yes, thank you.
You know, there are no great dressers in Washington, D.C. anymore. Senator John Tower from Texas was renowned for his tailoring.
Okay.
He was a relatively short man. He was about 5'5", 5'4", and he had his suits made by a tailor in London.
Mm-hmm.
Jake Pickle, J.J. Pickle, was a 300-pound Democratic congressman from Texas,
mm-hmm.
and he was known for being particularly slovenly. And one day, Senator Tower said, "Jake, is that a Sears and Roebuck suit you're wearing? That's awful. You got to get yourself a nice suit like this." And Pickle looked at it and said, "John, that's a good-looking suit. What does it cost in a man's size?"
Mm-hmm.
John Warner of Virginia
Nice.
was also a really well-dressed gentleman. But look good, feel good. If the whole world is a stage, then you should always be in costume. And before you can break the rules, you need to know what the rules are. My new book, Stone's Rules,
mm-hmm.
which is the least political book of any of the books I have written,
mm-hmm.
goes into this in great detail. So if you are a young man just starting in business or social media or tech
mm-hmm.
or entertainment or even agriculture, there's the basics that you need to know about how to build a serviceable wardrobe, how to take care of your clothes so that they last a long time, and so on. I commend that book to you, Stone's Rules. You can learn how to budget an online media campaign. You
mm-hmm.
can learn how to pick up a pair of trousers.
Nice.
You can learn my mother's recipe for marinara sauce. It's all in the book.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Roger, for joining us. This has been great. Again, we'll include links to all your books, and we'll include a link to stonedefensefund.com so you guys can all check that out. So thanks again for joining us, Roger. We appreciate it.
Great to be here. Many thanks.